When a man hurts you, whether through betrayal, manipulation, or emotional neglect, your instinct might scream for retaliation, confrontation, or tears. That's normal. That's human. But if you want to truly shift the dynamic, if you want to leave him stunned, confused, and questioning what just happened, don't play the role he expects. Don't break. Don't chase. Don't explain yourself over and over. Instead, evolve quietly, precisely, strategically. You see, most people expect pain to make you smaller. They expect it to distort you, to turn you into someone loud, reactive, desperate to be heard or validated. But real power comes not from how loudly you shout when you're hurt. It comes from how intentionally you respond. Emotional chaos is easy. It's what they expect. But emotional clarity, that's rare. That's unsettling to the one who thought they had control. When you speak, speak from composure. When you act, act from purpose. And when you walk away, do it with posture, not bitterness. Because what truly confuses someone who once hurt you is when you don't respond the way they conditioned you to, when you don't collapse, when you don't beg, when you don't spiral. They're forced to sit with their own actions without your pain to distract them from it. Silence in this case is not passive. It's surgical. It severs the emotional hook they tried to implant in you. They may expect you to scream, to cry, to prove you care. But when you stop trying to prove anything, when you carry your dignity like a sword, you become a mirror to their own immaturity. And that kind of reflection is hard to face. And it doesn't end there. Confuse them even more by improving. Level up. Not for revenge, not to prove anything, but because you deserve it. Let the pain shape your clarity. Let it refine your standards. Let it teach you how to never allow such hurt to slip past your boundaries again. When a man sees that what he did didn't destroy you, but made you more focused, more grounded, more self-contained, that's when the power dynamic flips. The goal is not to make him suffer. The goal is to make you immune, to master yourself so deeply that no external betrayal can undo your internal foundation. That's real power. That's the kind of strength that doesn't need validation, doesn't seek revenge, doesn't waste energy on people who lack the emotional depth to appreciate you. So next time a man hurts you, don't yell, don't shrink, don't explain. Let your healing confuse him. Let your silence challenge him. Let your growth dismantle every false belief he had about your dependence. Because at the end of the day, the strongest thing you can do is continue without him better than ever, without ever needing to say a word. Would you like this speech expanded into a script? 1,000 words? Or crafted for voiceover delivery next? Pain is often misunderstood. People assume it's a weakness, a flaw, or something to be hidden or suppressed. But in truth, pain is one of the most profound teachers life has to offer. It is not something to run from. It's something to study, to understand, to listen to with precision. When a man hurts you, whether emotionally, psychologically, or spiritually, your first response might be to internalize it, to believe that something is wrong with you. But pain is not always a sign that you're broken. It's a signal. A signal that something within you must be confronted, transformed, or reinforced. Emotional pain is not a verdict on your worth. It is data. It's telling you where your boundaries may have been too soft, where your expectations may have been unrealistic, or where you trusted someone who didn't have the emotional maturity to be worthy of it. And this is not about blame. This is about responsibility. The kind of responsibility that says, I will not let this pain go to waste. I will examine it. I will learn from it. And I will use it to become stronger than I was before. When someone hurts you, you can either collapse into that pain or you can rise through it. But to rise, you must first become curious. You must ask, why did this affect me so deeply? Where was I too attached to an outcome, a person, or an illusion? These questions are not easy. They take courage. But every answer you uncover makes you less likely to be hurt in the same way again. Because now you know. Now you know. Now you see. Now you're awake. People think healing is about forgetting. It's not. Healing is about seeing clearly. When you see pain not as punishment but as preparation, everything changes. You stop seeing yourself as a victim and start seeing yourself as a student of life. And students grow. They evolve. They stop making the same choices. They stop tolerating the same behavior. They stop abandoning themselves just to feel temporarily accepted or loved. That is the power of pain when approached with wisdom. A man who hurts you may walk away thinking he had the final word, but he doesn't. Because the real ending isn't what happens between you and him, it's what happens inside you afterward. Do you allow that pain to turn you bitter? Or do you let it burn away your naivety and build in its place a more resilient, grounded, and aware version of yourself? The truth is, most people are not taught how to process pain with intelligence. We are taught to distract, to numb, to move on quickly, or to fight back. But none of that leads to real transformation. The only way out is through the questions, through the discomfort, through the long conversations you have with yourself in the quiet. And slowly, without even realizing it, the pain becomes part of your foundation. It no longer defines you, it fortifies you. Pain, especially the kind caused by betrayal or rejection, offers one of the clearest mirrors into your emotional structure. What you learn from that reflection determines whether the same story repeats itself or ends with you. And here's the secret. The more clearly you understand your pain, the less power it holds over you. And the less power it holds, the more powerful you become. So no, pain is not weakness. Pain is a signal. And if you treat it like a signal instead of a sentence, you'll rise from it with a deeper sense of self, sharper awareness, and an unshakable clarity that no man can ever take from you again. Emotional chaos is the default state when we haven't yet trained our minds to respond with clarity. It's natural, even expected, that when someone hurts us, especially someone we trusted, we react with emotion, anger, sadness, confusion, resentment. These emotions flare up and take control like a wildfire because they are immediate, primal responses. But if you want to truly take back control, to confuse the one who hurt you and reclaim your power, you must learn to replace emotional chaos with emotional precision. Emotional precision is not about suppressing your feelings or pretending they don't exist. It's about understanding what you're feeling, why you're feeling it, and being able to articulate it clearly to yourself first, and only if necessary to others. Most people get stuck in emotional loops because they don't have the words or frameworks to define their pain. They say, "I'm angry," but they don't explore what's underneath. Is it betrayal? Is it abandonment? Is it disappointment? Clarity begins when you stop generalizing your pain and start dissecting it. When you master this kind of emotional literacy, you become incredibly difficult to manipulate. People who rely on pushing your buttons, gaslighting your experience, or using confusion as a weapon suddenly find themselves powerless because you are no longer reacting from the place they expect. You are responding from a place they can't reach. You become unpredictable. And unpredictability confuses people who thrive on controlling your reactions. This is where strength is built, not by having no emotions, but by knowing exactly where each emotion comes from and what to do with it. You become someone who can be hurt, but not undone. Someone who can feel deeply, but is not ruled by those feelings. That's intimidating to someone who assumed they could shake your foundation with a few words or a few cruel actions. They don't expect you to come back with insight. They don't expect you to become more stable than you were before. And here's the deeper truth. People are not just confused by your silence. They are confused by your calm. When you speak with emotional clarity instead of emotional fire, it forces them to hear themselves. It strips away the drama and places the spotlight directly on their behavior. You don't even have to accuse them. You simply reflect reality with such precision, it becomes impossible to ignore. And because you're not fighting or pleading, they lose the emotional leverage they thought they had over you. Clarity is control. When you know what you feel and why, you can decide how to move. You're not pulled by emotional waves. You're directing the current. And when you can do that in the face of someone who tried to hurt you, you send a very loud message without ever raising your voice. I am not the same person you hurt. I have evolved. That's how you confuse someone who expects chaos. You give them coherence. That's how you throw off someone who expects pain to destroy you. You use it to refine your strength. You take the confusion they wanted you to feel and hand it right back to them in the form of your composure. That is emotional power, and that is how you become untouchable. Silence is one of the most misunderstood and underestimated tools in the human arsenal. When someone hurts you, especially someone who expects a reaction, the absence of one becomes deafening. Strategic silence isn't about avoidance or passivity. It's an active and conscious decision to not participate in a dynamic designed to disempower you. People who hurt others often expect certain responses: confrontation, breakdowns, begging, or chaos. They feed off the emotional aftermath because it keeps the spotlight off their own behavior and puts it on your reaction. But when you offer nothing, no defense, no explanation, no retaliation, you break that cycle completely. Strategic silence forces reflection. It creates discomfort in the other person because now they're left alone with their actions, without your response to blur the consequences. You see, most people don't want to sit in the presence of their own cruelty or immaturity. They want distraction, emotional noise, anything that lets them escape the mirror you're holding up. When you go silent, when you withdraw your energy and refuse to engage in their emotional game, it forces that mirror into place. They don't see your pain anymore. They see themselves. And for some, that is terrifying. But silence doesn't just serve to confuse them. It also protects you. It becomes a space where you can gather your thoughts, sort your emotions, and return to yourself. It becomes a boundary line that says, I will not bleed just to show you that I'm hurt. Strategic silence is not suppression. You're still processing, you're still feeling, but you're doing it on your own terms. You're not giving away your emotional power by explaining, justifying, or defending yourself to someone who has already shown they do not value it. In many situations, silence becomes the loudest answer. It says more than 100 angry words ever could. Because in that silence, there is strength, control, and above all, mystery. The person who hurt you begins to wonder what you're thinking, what you're planning, how you're feeling. And that uncertainty is more disarming than any argument. It confuses them because they no longer know where they stand with you. They can't predict your moves, can't read your emotional state, and that loss of control unsettles them. Strategic silence teaches discipline. It teaches you that you don't need to explain yourself to someone who made the conscious choice to disrespect you. It teaches you that your peace is not something to be negotiated in the heat of someone else's immaturity. And it teaches you that walking away quietly can sometimes echo louder than staying and shouting. It's a practice in self-respect and choosing to protect your mind and heart rather than prove your point to someone unworthy of that effort. People often confuse silence with weakness, but in reality, it takes far more strength to stay silent than to speak when you're hurt. To hold your ground without lashing out. To control the space between stimulus and response. This is not submission, it's strategy. It's choosing when and how to respond rather than being pulled into someone else's emotional storm. When you master that, you're no longer just reacting, you're leading a authority. And perhaps the most powerful outcome of strategic silence is this. It allows you to respond later if and when you choose from a place of calm, clarity, and control. Not from a place of emotional reactivity, not from woundedness, but from wisdom. That kind of response, if you even give one, carries weight because it's deliberate. And anything done deliberately with full awareness always hits harder than something done in the heat of the moment. So when someone hurts you and expects a war, give them silence. Let it wrap around them like a fog they can't escape. Let it unsettle their assumptions. Let it return your power. Because that's silence. That's not emptiness. That's presence. That's strength. And that's exactly how you shift the dynamic without ever raising your voice. Detachment is not a lack of care. It's the presence of inner peace in the face of external storms. When someone hurts you, especially when it's someone close, the instinct is to either retaliate or cling to the hope that they'll realize their mistake and fix it. But this emotional dependency becomes a trap, one that ties your well-being to someone else's behavior. True strength begins when you learn the power of emotional detachment. Not coldness, not indifference, but the deep understanding that your inner state is not determined by someone else's inability to treat you with respect or love. Detachment is about reclaiming your center. It is the ability to observe what's happening without being consumed by it. When a man hurts you and you respond with calm detachment instead of emotional chaos, you're sending a signal, not to him, but to yourself. You're saying, I no longer give others the authority to dictate how I feel about myself. This is not a passive act. It is a disciplined practice. You're not ignoring reality. You're choosing which parts of it deserve your emotional investment. Think of your emotional energy like currency. Every time you react to someone who's mistreated you, every time you overthink, replay the situation, or question your worth, you're spending that currency. Detachment teaches you to spend wisely. You don't have to invest in every conflict, every opinion, every wound someone throws at you. You can observe, reflect, and let go without engaging in the drama. That's not weakness, that's mastery. Because the one who controls their inner world cannot be easily shaken by what happens in the outer one. People are often confused by someone who detaches with grace, because it removes their leverage. They expect a fight, a breakdown, a chase. But when you stand still, emotionally steady, mentally clear, they're forced to confront themselves. They no longer have the power to move you, and that power vacuum makes them uncomfortable. They begin to question what they've lost. They start to see you differently. Not as someone they can toy with, but as someone who has evolved past their reach. It's in how you talk to yourself when no one else is around. Because if the voice in your head is still echoing the insults or dismissals of someone else, your work is not finished. You have to replace that voice with your own, stronger, wiser, and rooted in truth. Sometimes the most confusing thing you can do to someone who hurt you is not fall apart, not chase, not seek revenge, but to rebuild in silence, to thrive in the aftermath, to become so deeply grounded in your self-worth that their actions no longer have the power to define you. That's when the dynamic shifts. That's when you stop being the wounded and start being the unstoppable. And the irony is, by the time they realize what they've lost, you've already built something better within yourself. Rebuilding self-worth isn't just healing, it's transformation. You don't return to who you were, you evolve into who you were always meant to be. And that version of you, the one who knows their value, walks in strength and no longer tolerates less than they deserve, that version is unshakable. Not because they were never hurt, but because they turned that hurt into the foundation of their power. Confusing someone who hurt you isn't about manipulation or playing games. It's about disrupting the power dynamics they thought they had over you. When someone expects you to fall apart, to beg to be angry, or to collapse emotionally under the weight of their mistreatment, choosing an unexpected and empowered response sends a shockwave through their assumptions. It forces them to reevaluate everything they thought they knew about you. And in that disruption, you begin to regain control, not over them, but over yourself. The confusion isn't about chaos. It's about clarity. It's about showing, without words, that the version of you they hurt is not the one they're dealing with anymore. Start by shifting your energy. If someone expects you to chase them, pull away instead. Not from a place of pride, but from a place of purpose. Walk away with grace, not with drama. When someone hurts you and believes you'll collapse, the most unexpected response is calm, steady, centered calm. The kind that says, I am affected, yes, but I am not destroyed. Because confusion arises when your reaction doesn't match the script they wrote for you. And if they can't predict you, they can't control you. That's where your power starts to return, when you stop dancing to their rhythm and start moving to your own. Another way to confuse someone who hurt you is to thrive. Not pretend to thrive, genuinely build a life that reflects growth, confidence, and direction. Focus on your evolution, not on their presence. The more you pour into yourself, the less room there is for their chaos. People who hurt others often expect their victims to stay emotionally tethered to them, to remain stuck in the past. But when you outgrow the pain and invest in becoming someone stronger, more aware, more fulfilled, they don't know where to place you anymore. Because the version of you they wounded no longer exists. You've transcended it. Silence, as mentioned before, also confuses. But so does kindness when it's real, grounded, and detached from expectation. Imagine being kind to someone who tried to harm you, not out of weakness or submission, but because you've matured beyond the need to retaliate. That kind of emotional strength is rare. It unsettles those who expect bitterness. When someone expects hatred and you offer neutrality or even measured compassion, it exposes their immaturity without you having to say a word. It highlights the contrast between your growth and their stagnation. But the most profound way to confuse someone who hurt you is to no longer be emotionally affected by them, to speak their name and feel nothing, to hear their stories and not react, to look back without longing or resentment, just understanding. Just understand. Because once you reach that point, you've truly taken your power back. They can no longer feed off your emotions, your reactions, or your attention. And that emptiness where your pain used to be, that's where peace lives. That's where freedom begins. The process isn't easy. It takes time, discipline, and self-awareness. But the reward is unmatched. When you confuse someone who hurt you through your growth, your silence, your thriving, it isn't about revenge. It's about creating a boundary so powerful and unshakable that their energy can no longer penetrate it. And from that boundary, you build a new life, one where your peace is non-negotiable, one where your emotions serve you, not sabotage you, one where your past becomes your strength, not your prison. In the end, confusing someone who hurts you is really just you evolving so far beyond their reach that they can't recognize you anymore, and they shouldn't, because you're not the same. You've grown, you've healed, you've learned, and now you're a force they never expected, not because you fought them, but because you chose to rise when they expected you to fall. The path to healing is not just about moving on, it's about consciously choosing growth over stagnation. Healing isn't forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It's deciding that the pain will no longer be the lens through which you see the world. When someone has hurt you, especially someone you trusted, the emotional wound can create a distorted reality where fear, self-doubt, and resentment begin to shape your thoughts. Healing demands that you confront that distortion not with denial, but with courage. It requires you to be honest about what broke, and even more honest about what needs to be rebuilt. And what needs to be rebuilt first is your relationship with yourself. Healing means taking responsibility, not for the hurt, but for the direction of your life after the hurt. That's where most people get stuck. They wait for time to pass, assuming healing is a passive process, but time alone doesn't heal, it only creates distance. What heals is what you do with that time. The thoughts you challenge, the habits you change, the truths you face. You have to become an active participant in your own recovery. That means choosing to release blame not for the other person's benefit, but for your own freedom. Because holding on to blame keeps you tied to the past. Letting go allows you to create a future. It also means accepting that healing isn't linear. Some days you'll feel powerful and clear. Other days the pain will knock the wind out of you unexpectedly. That's not failure. It's part of the process. Growth isn't smooth, it's messy and inconsistent. But every time you choose to keep going, to keep believing in your ability to overcome, you reinforce a powerful truth. That healing is not about the speed at which you move, but the direction. You may crawl some days and sprint others, but as long as you're moving forward, you're progressing. An essential part of healing is rediscovering your identity outside of the hurt. When someone damages your trust, it's easy to let that become your story. But you are not the betrayal or the heartbreak or the moment of weakness. You are who you choose to become in response to it. Rebuilding your identity means asking hard questions. What do I value? What kind of relationships do I deserve? What boundaries will I no longer compromise? Answering those questions creates a framework for a new chapter, one built on self-awareness, not self-protection, on purpose, not fear. Healing also involves letting love back in, not necessarily from others at first, but from yourself. Because if the voice in your head is still cruel, still repeating the words someone else used to diminish you, then the wound is still open. You need to replace that voice with one that uplifts, one that reminds you of your strength and potential. This isn't toxic positivity. This is reprogramming your inner world so it becomes a source of safety and encouragement. The way you talk to yourself matters. It shapes your resilience, your confidence, and ultimately your future. Eventually, healing leads to something deeper than peace. It leads to transformation. You begin to see the pain not as something that defines you, but as something that refined you. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what can I create from this? That shift is where your power lives. Because the person who was healed doesn't just recover, they evolve. They stop surviving and start building. They stop reacting and start choosing. And in that choice, they create a life that the old version of themselves couldn't even imagine. You don't heal by going back to who you were before the pain. You heal by becoming someone wiser, stronger, and more whole than you've ever been. That's the gift hidden inside the struggle, the opportunity to become something more. And that journey begins the moment you stop waiting for the pain to disappear and start working to rise above it. You're not broken, you're becoming. And that becoming is what confuses those who expected you to stay broken. Because healing, real healing, is the greatest comeback of all.